here for Tuesday, April 8th meeting for the Inland Wetland Watercourse. Introduce the members on the commission. To my left,
Bill Profetto, Drew Gunning,
Jim Ewan.
and I'm Rick Mangione. That's Katie Keel and Scott Allen, Enforcement Officer. Let's go for a consideration of March 11th minutes. I only saw one thing, which was on page 3. Second to the last paragraph, Enforcement Officer Allen stated that Skyview Homeowners Association is no longer obligated. Right? Should be a no there.
I thought, second paragraph, should, midway down, should that read 65 days?
Same page?
Yeah, same page. Prior to expiration date.
Extension of 65. Yeah. Anyone see anything else? Hello.
I thought you were Diana. I just... Never mind. It's been a long day.
We're going through the minutes right now, so in case you want to know. Yeah, all the days are 24 hours. They're all long. Yes, we are. So everybody knows you had a long day. We're going through the minutes right now. We just had 2 corrections. I don't know, give you a chance to take a look at them. If there isn't any other corrections, somebody entertain a motion?
I make a motion that minutes be received as read.
We have a motion, we have a second? Second. Second, all in favor? Aye. Everyone's in favor. We'll wait for Diane. We just finished the minutes.
Okay.
So, that was the hard part. Routine business, correspondence. Do we have any correspondence? Yes, we do. Connecticut Wildlife Magazine. We'll pass this around. I think this is kept at your office too, in case anybody wants to look at it. New applications. We have 2 new applications. First one is Castleberry Estates.
Applications are for receipt.
For receipt. And we also have Whitney Acres, lot number 2 for receipt, which will be discussed at our next meeting, 2 weeks from now. Put those away. Next, for discussion, we don't have anything. For new business, American Legion Hall, Grassy Hill Road. Is there somebody here?
Mr. Plaskowitz, I believe, is in the audience.
Come on up. See, you had 5 more minutes.
5 more?
No, you have 5 minutes. You came a little early.
Okay, good. George Plaskowitz, 301 Orange Center Road.
George, why don't you explain what the proposal is, please?
Okay, essentially, the fellas that are involved in the hall have a wish list, and on their wish list is to clean up their backyard. I have the equipment. I intend to donate my time, services. They're going to pay for the fuel because fuel costs are up a little bit. And I offered to do that met with Scott, we discussed it briefly. He suggested that we get together at the meeting and see if we can get permission to proceed.
Is this like in the back parking lot?
Yes.
Is there like brush?
Brush.
Logs.
It's just,
Oh, I got
you know what it
pictures.
is? It's an area that that has not been maintained for many years. And it just needs to be reclaimed, and the guys are hoping that they can get it back to where it was and then mow it. We're not going into the water. We intend to stay minimum, probably better than 25 feet from the edge of the actual water course.
Is it treed right now, or is it just brush?
It's not heavily treed. There are some trees that are involved that are going to come down. Nothing, again, within 25 feet of the water.
And there used to be grass?
Yes, I grew up across the street from there, and I recollect it being a lawn-type area, not very well maintained, not a perfect lawn, not a golf course, but
And what would the reason be for that?
these guys want to reclaim it so that they can use it as like a park area, go in the back, maybe fish in the stream, things of that nature.
If you look at those photos, you can actually see a fire pit. There's I'm not sure which one of them it is. It's kind of off the back parking lot. So it used to be more or less like a picnic area back there years ago, and it's just gotten to the point where it's overgrown again. It's more or less, how does the commission want to handle this?
Are you just clearing out like around the bigger trees?
Yes, more or less
I mean,
reclaiming.
you're not gonna clear cut?
No.
Right.
No, that's not the intent.
Right.
Just that they're gonna rescue as many trees as possible.
Right.
The intent is not to clear cut, just rescue the land that was at one point in time maintained and reclaim what they were maintaining then. And essentially, maintain it so that they
Right.
can utilize the property as opposed to, it's difficult to get back there now. And they're all older gentlemen, they're up in age, and again, it's part of their wish list.
Right.
So it looks to me like there's a perimeter of trees around an area that got a little rough in the middle, an
Correct.
elongated area, so you're not gonna trim, you're not gonna cut the big trees that's surrounding, just
No.
clear out the middle,
Correct,
just the elongated area.
right.
What kind of vegetation is in there now? What's growing in there?
It's grown, but it's more like a brushy, scrappy brush kind of vegetation. I don't know how to describe it exactly.
Briars or shrubs
Not
or...
necessarily shrubs, possibly briars.
And how would you clear those off of there?
I intend to go in with a bulldozer, regrade.
Oh, that's different than just clearing up vegetation too.
Okay.
That's,
We got the-
for me, that's quite a bit
the
different.
pictures right there.
Backblade it out, restore it, reseed it so that it's a lawn area.
How high above the water is that land, do you know? Is it
Not
swamp?
very.
Well, I mean, well, that's what I'm looking, because the water's all the way around it.
I'm not sure
I would
which
say
one is it.
5
Oh, see where your hand is
Lower
right
right
now?
corner.
Right where your fingers are is
Right,
the
your
parking
fingers is the
lot.
parking lot.
And then
He's gonna go towards the back.
see the open strip behind it? It's thinner.
You see how it's a different shade?
All the way back, leaving a 25-foot strip around here?
Mhm.
Is it walkable right now, or just,
There's like a pathway that you can find access to the water, but it's minimal.
It's like early successional, lawn to forest. More than early, it's been kind of going along for a few years.
it's just this part right here, right?
I believe it really needs to be defined quite clearly, and the commission has to decide if they're going to accept 25 feet or not.
And that was my concern too. I'd like to see, and an application with a plan where it's clearly defined on the plan and we know what we're approving rather than just say, yeah, go ahead. And especially since there's going to be grading, we want to make sure we've got erosion controls in there. I'm just real uncomfortable saying, yeah, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I anticipated installing silt fence in any area that was disturbed. And/or hay bales, whichever you prefer. To prevent anything to finding it, from finding its way into the watercourse.
And the reason for you doing this gratis is what?
Their budget is minimal.
Okay.
So are you still staying 25 feet away from this side too, the back?
Yes, all
Is
areas
this
that are
going, is this
bordered by
going
water.
straight like this, or is this gonna go, here's the parking lot? Are you
Yes.
going straight
Correct,
parallel with it?
yeah, and then,
And 25 here and 25 around this way?
correct.
George, what's the largest tree that you'd take down?
Not larger than 12 inch.
That's a pretty good size.
If there's anything that's, if it's not tipping and/or, if it's not of any real,
A 12-inch tree can take out a pretty good-sized canopy.
if you'd prefer to leave the trees, that's okay. We can deal with that.
Well, that's what I would think the trees would remain, if it's gonna be like a picnic area, not,
Yeah, we're not, the intent is not to clear cut anything, but there are some trees that are leaning, tilting, that are not healthy, more or less.
I just think when you're bulldozing, you're going to end up taking down a lot of trees. I don't see how you protect the trees
If
and
you- if
bulldoze
you
at the
walk
same time.
Well, you can do that. If you walk the property, you'll see that it's basically more of a backblading type situation as opposed to a dozing operation and stockpiling the material. We're not stockpiling anything, we're just cleaning up the vegetation that won't allow the grass to grow.
Why can't you just take out the vegetation with a brush hog and then mow it? Why, or replant it? Why do you need to backblade
That
it?
might be an alternative, but I have heavier equipment as opposed to a brush hog.
well, I would like to just take a walk back there just to see
It's not a problem.
if it was lawn before.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone
Well,
else.
it was cleared, you can see by the picture.
No, I could see, it's a
Yeah.
different shade,
Right.
Well, the other thing is, we're establishing, if he's establishing a lawn and we're approving that, I'd like to have a plan that says this is where it is. So it's not something that next year they go out and they expand it, and the next year expand it. We've got something, concrete that we can say, no, this is what was approved.
It works for me. If that's what's required, then it's a non-issue, we'll get it.
Well, I just want to walk back there to see if it's.
I'll be glad to meet you
Like
at
if your
your...
bulldozer's going to sink down 2 feet.
Let's
right?
go, no, it's not
Right.
that type of
Right.
situation. It's all gravel underneath there, if
Okay.
I'm not mistaken, because that whole area was dredged at one time. That was a man-made lake.
And this is your property or American Legion?
The American Legion is not my land, no.
No, but, I see there's a house right next door.
No, that's not my property.
Right. Do
I
they
grew
have
up-
rights all the way down, or?
The American Legion owns the land all the way to the
Oh.
river.
Yeah, but how about back?
That piece to the right actually belongs to the T.M. Wright family.
This?
Yes. I believe the house
That
that
other
you're
house
referring
was-
to was built about maybe 8 years ago or
Right.
Well, I
so.
remember we approved this.
Right.
But I'm just saying,
I think they only have about 3 acres,
like right around here.
Right.
to the best of my knowledge.
I don't think
Okay.
they extend beyond that.
And then you think this is rights land right here?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I just don't want to have a problem of anything getting cleared of the other
We're
neighbor.
working inside that tree line. If
Right here,
you
there.
see that defined tree line?
Right there.
Yes,
Right.
inside that tree line. And nothing's coming down outside of that area. Nothing is going to be touched
Right.
beyond that point. But it was clear at one point in time, as you can see, and it's just Mother Nature's trying to reclaim it.
But I do think it's going to be necessary to have a definitive plan and application.
Not a problem.
Okay. Oh, in the meantime, if any commission members want to take a walk just to see how it is, and then, the
I'll be
next
glad to meet
meeting,
with anybody.
the next
Yeah.
meeting you could bring something in.
Sure. If we can get together and meet on site, that would be something I'd be glad to entertain.
You can't meet more than 3 people, correct?
2.
2? Because it becomes a meeting, and then we need a secretary.
Well, we could have a special meeting, a site visit. I mean,
Absolutely, I mean,
Or we could do that too.
but it's also
That's not an
daylight
issue.
now where people can just wander back and forth after supper or whatever, and
Right.
yeah, it doesn't matter to me. There looks like a cleared area or something. There's not a stream there, is there? Right in here, it looks like,
No.
what
No,
is
that
that?
was the area that was cleared and mowed at one time that they want to reclaim that hasn't been taken
Look
care of.
along the edge of the parking lot there, and then it follows along down there. It's kind of a darkish area, and it only looks like it's maybe, 10
Yeah.
feet wide or something.
Right here, all the way down.
Yeah, that.
There is some intermittent drainage from Grassy Hill Road that comes down through there.
Okay, and have you noticed any wetlands in the area, or was it something that's just been filled right up to the pond, or that?
I was out there last fall, and in fact, I was out there about 3 times last year because of trees across the Whipple, and I did not see anything that resembled a wetland in that area. In fact, like I said, it was pretty well mined and stripped out many, many years ago.
Many years ago, there was a train trestle used to go up about 25 or 30 feet just across that river there, behind that larger home on the other side of the river, which TM dismantled, Tommy Wright dismantled many years back. But yes, that's correct. That was mined and cut down quite a few feet.
It is the Whipple River that you're looking at coming into Whipple Lake there, or Lake Whipple.
Do you want to set a time to go there? Or just, I mean, I know it's
Catch
good.
can.
What?
Catch as catch can.
Yeah, anytime.
Is there any time convenient for everyone, or how would you?
Well, if you want to, if more than one person's going, we all could go. I don't know, like, it's gonna be rainy from Friday to about Tuesday, so I don't know.
I mean, if it's going to be tabled till the next meeting regardless, I mean, whenever's convenient for you guys. Scotty, you guys can come to terms, and then someone contact me, and I'll accommodate your schedule.
Well, I think what it's going to boil down to is that, even if 2 or 3 people wander out there on their own, they're probably, unless it's actually scheduled as a meeting, there isn't going to be any discussion.
Right.
Even if it is scheduled as a meeting, there shouldn't be any discussion out there. Everything has to be
Okay.
brought back here
Okay.
for a discussion. So I'm thinking in my own mind that those that have questions, comments, and concerns would almost define a line in the sand in their own minds and figure out about how far they're willing to let this project go
Okay.
outward.
Yep.
And then that is something that would probably have to be put on some type of site plan, sketch, plot plan, or whatever.
Okay.
Trying, again, thinking that if their budget is that tight, that I don't anticipate we're going to have a surveyed plan and engineered drawings and all that kind of stuff, just more or less a plot plan with this is how far you can go and how far you can't go.
If you could, I mean, if you're gonna get pieces of rebar, just put them down
Yeah.
where you think. tie it with
We
a
can
piece-
stake it and
Put a
flag
piece
it.
of caution tape.
Sure.
This way, next week, when we go there,
Okay,
we know the area
okay.
where the grass is. It'd be
Oh.
easier that way.
All right, so I've got till the end of the weekend, early next week?
Yeah.
Okay,
So we'll go week from today after.
okay.
So you got a whole week to,
Yeah, and anybody, feel free, just stop in and take a peek so that
just put a couple pieces of
pictures
rebar,
was
some
the...
caution tape.
Right.
And then we'll know where the limits are.
Okay,
Okay.
fair enough. Yep,
Sound good?
yep, works for me.
Okay. Yep.
Appreciate your time. Thanks,
Thank you.
folks.
See you in 2 weeks.
Yep, appreciate it. Have a good night.
Okay, moving on to old business. Wetland permits, 3-year activity schedule. I assume this is from the last approval?
This is from the last go-around. What we actually did is took a copy of a, let's see, what did we make a copy of here? Just December 12th, '06 approval for somebody because we redacted all of the information on there other than, just pass those on. I don't know why we did that, that's fine.
Is this one or
No, there's one each.
one each? Got it?
Typically, the bottom is what we're looking at. Activity must be initiated within 3 years from date of approval, and that the permit is valid for 5 years, and that was the basis of all that discussion that we had. Do you need another one? We also have statute too, Diane, if you want that.
So, we gotta clear up what activity is, so like cutting a couple trees within 3 years, is that considered activity?
I was looking in the regs, there are references to two different kinds of permits and limiting the time frame for regulated activity to occur. So that's what I was looking up in here, and it may be a little bit more helpful. Do you know what I'm talking about, Scott?
Yeah, and that was part of where I think we need to maybe define things on these permits a little bit more carefully as to what this activity is that must be initiated within that 3-year time period. That's really where we're at.
Well, I mean, when permits come in for approval now, we could say within 3 years, septic system has to be installed? Or you can't do that? I mean,
Yeah, you can do that.
for major activity versus cutting a couple of trees down every year. Or a footing or foundation has to be in.
Again, is that
It's not a wetland thing, but it's to
It
keep the
depends-
permit valid.
Depends upon how far away it is, I think is the other side of it too.
All roof drains has to be installed.
Scott, do you have the statutes there?
I think so. Thought so. Yeah, I do. Let's see if I can get to that.
This is going to mirror that, right?
No, it really doesn't, if memory serves me. What section are you in there? Did you find where you looked for it?
In the regulations is 38153, duration of permits.
In 8-25, 26, and I believe 8-3 are all zoning statutes.
Those are referrals for subdivisions, site plan, and special exceptions. So when we get those kind of applications in, then what it says is the commission may establish a specific time period within which any regulated activity shall be conducted. Any other permit, like something that doesn't go to zoning for site plan, subdivision, or special exception, I'm assuming goes under the second part of that, which says, any permit issued under this article for any other activity shall be valid for not less than 2 years and not more than 5 years. To me, it sounds like if it's a zoning referral, you could reduce it even further than 2 years, but if it's not, then you can only reduce it to 2 years. But for the zoning referrals, you can only specify the time period within which any regulated activity can occur.
They do, that does mirror part of statute in its entirety. It does mimic 22A-42A, adoption of regulations, permits, etc. Under 22A-42A, Section 2 mirrors R381, or we mirror their Section 2, 381-53 for duration of permit. It reads exactly the same thing. if you, I'll flip this over to you. And go to your next page. We have nothing in our regs that says anything about the 3 years.
This is just written in there. I mean, must be done with 3 years. It's just,
Yeah,
it's
because
not in the regs.
again, somewhere in statute, it reads that the commission can put that in. And again, I don't remember, it seems to me like it's always been there.
Yeah, I don't know about the 3 years. I think this is where we get it from, though, this number 2, which says that you can limit it to 2 years.
2 years.
And maybe the commission at some point said, no, let's do it 3 years.
I would need to dig some more, because I did find it in there where it says there, the duration, provided the commission could, there was a proviso the commission could put whatever number they wanted in between that 2 and 5 years for the activity to be initiated. And
Well, that may
find
be where it says not less than 2 years and not more than 5 years.
That's probably it right there.
back of my mind tells me there was still another section that actually gave us a proviso.
Well, I've always, this is a kind of a funny thing, and because in one instance it's referring to regulated activity and the other it doesn't seem to be. So how do
That's
you...
where I'm having a problem with what's on our permit. What
Yeah.
shall it be? Again, it's not, this is something that it's been inherited, something that we followed all these years, but I have no clue what it really, how it came about and why it's still there, or again, does it need to be revisited, which we said the last time around, and we are now revisiting it. I think we need to maybe either strike the 3 years altogether,
Keep it
or
5.
figure out what the activity is that you want initiated within the 3.
But it has to be, for example, for this one, you would have to say, the first one has to be done within 3 years, since it is in wetland area. Or your permit expires,
The way I read this, it says any permit issued under this article, meaning Article 3081-53, which would be an inland wetlands article, shall be valid for not less than 2 years. So in other words, you could not make it less than 2 years or more than 5 years. That's the way I read that.
You are correct. It's the actual activity that we're insisting that be initiated within 3 years is where we have the fuzzy area.
Okay.
Well, that's how the other one came up, how he said he did cut some trees within the first 2 years.
Yeah.
But is that considered activity?
Right, and that was part of the discussion
That was
last
the
time
discussion.
around.
No matter how you look
And
at it, he did do something, but
We did find that.
But then we discussed that we didn't want to really define what an activity was, because then we'd be limiting ourselves, right?
why not? But if he cuts one tree at the first week, and then he has 5 years. He just has to show where he cut the tree, be considered that activity.
And then the discussion went on about setting a precedent with just cutting one tree.
Right, anyone
And
can
that
do that.
we really didn't want to do that.
Well, why do we care whether he only cuts one tree if it's in a regulated area? If that's all he did, why do we care? His permit, he has a permit, and
Well, because the opening line there of timelines at the bottom of the permit,
It's for 3 years.
That starts
activity must be initiated within 3 years, but it doesn't say whether it's the wetland activity, the direct wetland activity, activity in upland area, activity in a regulated area. I think that's where the fuzziness comes in, and what are we actually asking to be done within that 3-year window? And that's what needs to be defined.
If we go by the statutes, for those that are referred to us under 8.3, 8.25, 8.26, it has to be regulated activity. There's no question, that's what the statutes say. If we used regulated activity, it could also apply to anything else, but that's the only reason it says here that we can establish a different time frame other than 5 years for those referred under 8.3, 8.25, and 8.26.
So that's only if it goes to zoning, though, is the way I'm interpreting that.
Right, only if it goes to zoning, but all of those that go to zoning, we can only limit the time period for the regulated activity, whereas others, we seem to have more flexibility on it. But if we're going to have one thing that we put on all of the permits, then we probably should make it match
And
the
typically,
regulated activity part.
right, that's I think the genesis for this whole conversation, number one, but the thing that fuzzes me a little bit here is that everything comes to wetlands first, typically before it even goes to zoning.
Right, because
So
if it gets denied here, it's done.
there are certain things that never get to zoning,
And I think that's the point,
you know. and-
is that if something is gonna go to zoning, you wanna keep a timeline, so you keep the process moving, so, I mean, that's
Well, like
just-
for American
it's just
Legion, we
activities.
would have to give him a limit saying it has to be done before, whatever, July. I mean, 'cause if you give an approval, he has 5 years to do it.
Right,
You know what I
and
mean?
he's not gonna go to zoning with this.
Right.
Well, and that's the second part of this. Do you have that text actually there?
Which,
If you,
oh, no, you got it right here.
Duration permit.
Yeah, no, I was reading it before.
there are two kinds of permits, or two kinds of limitations depending on the permit that we're allowed to do. So, it says, any permit issued under this section of any other activity shall be valid for not less than 2 years. But those that are referred to zoning, we can establish a specific time period within which regulated activity shall be conducted. I don't know that that necessarily means limited either. That's kind of a vague statement there. Limited.
read it one more time.
I think it's the bottom two there, big two.
See, I don't think that anything that comes to us under 8.3, 8.25, 8.26 can be limited to less than 5 years unless we're limiting the regulated activity.
Which I believe was probably the intent of this 3-year, that it probably should have been a regulated activity, but then now, in particular, with a 100-foot upland review area, that's a lot of activity that we're regulating. So, again, I think this first 6 words here and a couple of dates really needs to either be stricken or defined, so that there is so there's a lack of confusion, quite frankly, on my part.
I just have a problem with the sentence.
I think that's.
Well, that's the legislature.
No, it's
Statute.
just, I mean, I haven't seen this I've been dealing with regulations for like 15 years. I haven't seen this. 8-3, 8-25, or 8-26 shall be valid for 5 years, provided, past tense, the agency may establish. Okay, may, so the key word there is may.
Don't be marking up my
And
book now.
it's just pencil. You can erase it. Which is, it may or it may not.
Right.
So you
So, yeah,
have
in
a
other words,
choice.
you have that proviso, you can or
Right.
you cannot.
That's typical state language.
So it gives you the
Not
gray
really.
area and takes it away.
Right.
Not really,
That's
just, there are just words missing.
But because it says shall, that means it has to be 5 years unless we limit the time period for the regulated activity to occur. Not any activity, just regulated activity.
Right, so we're saying within 3 years, like this guy here would have to put the post and rail fence in, or he would lose his permit. Right? He would have to do the plantings within 3 years. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and again, that becomes,
So even if he doesn't build this house and all that,
yeah, this was I
or
actually
whatever it
recognize
was.
this permit
I do,
now.
I remember this too. Do you remember too?
I just wish they had called for inspections during all this. They haven't done yet from '06.
We're still working on it.
Yeah, but I believe this one even had, the infiltrators.
Yeah.
Yeah, third bullet down.
Yeah.
But one side of that, where those infiltrators were going for the garage addition were, at that time, well over 50 feet away from the wetland, or 40 feet away from the wetland, which is what our regulation was at the time. Now it would probably fall within that 100 feet. So for us to have to dissect each permit going forward to spell out and try to keep track of all these different timeframes, I'm going to tell you right now, a lot of that would fall through the cracks.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it would be extremely onerous to try
Yeah,
to
you
be able
can't
to
keep,
do that.
you can't chase people to remind them what they have to do.
Right, and to go back and revisit, it may not be a lot,
The only
20
way
a
you
year.
could do it is just say, listen, your permit expires in 3 years if these items aren't done, but you don't have to chase them. If they come back 4 years from now and say, hey, you didn't do this, this, and that, the permit's void.
Well, but I did one of them.
Or, well, that's right, that's what's gonna happen. Right.
Well, is it a regulated activity? If they submit a revised site plan, that's not a regulated activity, so that doesn't count. They have to actually physically go on the property and start conducting regulated activities, clearing or
Right, but
whatever.
if he only does the first one and not the others, and then he comes back 4 years from now, is his permit valid? He did one.
If that was a regulated activity.
Right,
Yeah,
it is.
if this says a regulated
Yeah.
activity must be initiated, yes.
Right, so then the
But how
permit's
many,
still good.
all of them? Did they
No.
all have to be
No.
done, or only one have to be done?
Well, regulated activity initiated, that means begun, so
So just
any,
one.
any initiation of any regulated
one.
activity. Yeah, just
Right.
one.
And cutting a tree is not one of them.
One tree doesn't work, huh?
Not if it's unless it's in the wetlands.
Or within 80 feet of a wetland, it still falls under, it's a regulated
Right.
activity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely the activity should be regulated if we keep this on here. But I like the idea of doing a limit because then we at least get to look at it again before, it's not 4 years
The
down the road.
permits are grandfather, are they not? They're not? So the 100-year, or the 100-foot upland review takes precedence even though the permit was approved before that effect?
No.
If this was a 40-foot back
At the-
then, and we changed 100, you stay with the 40 on this one.
Right, that's right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That,
Okay.
it's not that it's, I see what you're saying. The permit, whatever
The regulations.
distance was at the time
Mhm.
that was considered a regulated activity stays in place.
Right.
Right,
What changes there, if they allow the permit to expire totally,
right, then they go back to.
then they
the
come
reg-
back to whatever the current regs are.
Yes,
But if they come back and say, we cut a tree, and it's 4.5 years later, and this calls for 40 feet away, and now we're 100 feet away, that's where there'll be a bigger issue.
and if the 40-foot, if the tree they cut was 50 feet, not within the 40 feet, right?
According to the old,
Right.
right.
I would say that if it was, the one tree was within the 40 feet at that time, it constitutes a activity.
An initiation of the
Right.
activity. Again, it's clearly up to y'all.
Well, this doesn't come up that often, does it? I mean, I only can remember 2 that we extended.
Well, it's not so much the extension of the permit so much as is the permit actually valid at the end of the
Third year.
the third year if they only did one cut one tree, and basically that's what it boils down to, or even if they put one fence post in,
Right, they started.
or is that what we gotta hang our hat on or not? I mean, I think that's what it boils down to.
That, or you have to say, out of these 6 items, 3 must be completed by that year, and then you gotta give them a...
Well, they gotta be completed by the 5 years, they
Oh,
gotta be started, it
right.
doesn't say they have to be finished by 3 years.
Right, it gotta be-
It's started.
Right.
So they can put one fence post in, get right up to the 5 years and say, well, I already started my activity. Let me have my extension, it didn't expire yet.
Right.
'Cause if there's no substantial change to the plans, you can't deny them an extension.
Maybe we're looking at the wrong word here. It says that the activity must be initiated, and the statutes say conducted.
But it doesn't mean finished. It's just starting the job. I mean, if I bring a bulldozer on the site, is that starting? You know?
Conducting?
Well, I don't know, if you say the regulated activity must be conducted within the first 2 years, that would mean all of it has to be conducted within the first 2 years.
Conducted and completed, maybe?
Yeah, conducted implies completed.
Well, we could do that. We could, once you got the activity, it must be initiated and completed within the 3 years of wetland issues. So if he doesn't want to do his footing or foundation or septic system, that's fine. But everything regarding to wetlands has to be done within 3 years.
You
So
don't
this
even
way-
need the word initiated, do you? You just say completed.
Right, completed. You don't, right.
And that's much clearer.
No, because this way, whatever you ask for will get done.
Okay, now, then, let's say the permit expires in 2 years, 3 years, let's say, and they haven't completed it, but we have no more permit anymore.
Well, if they didn't complete the wetland,
But they, let's say they started it and they didn't complete it.
their permit's void.
And, but they've started it, so now what kind of a, I guess, enforcement tool do we have to make sure they get the site stabilized and completed? If the permit has expired, we can't pull their permit or something.
Well, what happens to a house that he starts, he runs out of money and he just sits there and he leaves? I mean, do they come back for another permit? I don't know. I mean, it's just like that. If you're building a house, somebody else has got to pick it up.
Let me just throw a monkey wrench in here. Read the second sentence. Once the permit has been issued, it will be valid for 5 years from date of approval. Period. So you can't tell them that your permit expired because you didn't do what you're supposed to do within 3 years because the activity's not defined. So his permit wouldn't expire within 3 years because it doesn't tell him that or them that it expired within 3 years.
You know what, probably what the intent would be, once he's conducted the work, then the permit can go for 5 years so he can complete it.
I don't think statute's going to allow that.
No, it
Yeah,
would,
that's-
because it can go up to 5 years.
Once you
before
start,
Yeah,
right.
so these two things actually are,
Well, the problem we have is starting time.
And what constitutes
Or
a start.
constitute a start.
Yeah, my feeling is that any activity, such as cutting one tree, putting in one fence post, within that regulated area constitutes an initiation.
I think so too.
And I think we should leave it at that.
And it has to be completed within 5 years.
Yes.
So,
And if it's not completed and the permit expires, then the enforcement is restoration of that regulated area, because the activity has not been completed. Which
it
means
doesn't
that the permit hasn't, conditions within the permit have not been satisfied, so regardless.
after 5 years, he comes back for the extension because he cut a tree already. That's what's gonna
Be
happen.
prior to the 5, just prior to the 5
Right,
years.
just prior to 5 years. And he'll get another 5 years.
Possibly.
Right.
or 1 year, or
Or whatever the commission decides.
The extension would be based on the newer rules or the old rules?
The old rules, but you're approving whatever was back then, which could be not good now.
That's why I was asking.
Or that's why people, they don't want to lose their permit, because they know the newer regs, they might not be able to get what they had.
This situation is a little unusual too, because he has a 5-acre piece that he bought from my parents years ago, and then he wasn't under any, so he owned it. Most people will go out and buy a lot for $400,000, they're not gonna,
They're not
Sit
gonna,
on it.
they're not gonna sit on it,
you know,
right?
the reality is that they're not gonna let it sit, because the clock is ticking at the bank.
Right.
My feeling is the amount of time this occurs and the potential maybe ramifications we have of changing it might be worse than just leaving it as it is.
And I'll then tie that with what Leslie just said about enforcement as far as, if the area needs to be restored or what have you, but if it... Remediated, but if, let's say, for example, that one of the conditions, which this number one condition on permit here is they had to put a split rail fence or post and rail fence, as exactly how it reads, 15 feet from the wetlands flags. I mean, you're talking 2 post holes here.
Right.
There's real no,
Well, it's better to leave them there than remove them.
I mean, at that point, there's nothing that was really, that needs to be fluffed and buffed or whatever. It's over and done. So I think a lot of it has to do, and your point is very well taken, but I think it has to do with the scope of what the regulated activity is besides. That's part of my thinking anyway. And again, one tree is regulated activity. You cut it down, hopefully you clean up your own mess with that one tree, but trees fall in the woods all day long, so what? I mean, that's where it...
But given that example, if he explained that he only cut down one tree because he wasn't sure what he was going to do next, and so there was a location issue, but he didn't want to do more because he didn't know when he was going to finish. So let's say he did more, and we had an erosion. Well, we had issues. That's worse, and that can even become more of an enforcement problem if the permit expires and we have to clean it up, and let's say he may not have the available money to clean it up. So his action was prudent.
That particular instance, right. But we also, one of our standard conditions of approval, the Wetlands Enforcement Officer be notified for the inspection of sediment erosion controls prior to construction. Right, I got it. You said, okay, thanks. I said the number, right? Yeah, it's our standard condition number 5. Sediment erosion controls, including construction entrances, shall be maintained throughout construction. So, technically, that one tree shouldn't have come down until the S&E controls were put up and I was notified of it, or
Right.
whomever the enforcement officer is. So, I mean, I think we have that sort of tied up in the language too. It all depends upon how diligent the permittee is
Well, I
and
guess,
following their permits.
Maybe this guy here, whoever owns this property, decides that he really doesn't want to build a house on it. He just wants to keep it as a lot until he's ready someday, 10, 15 years from now, gives it to one of his kids, and they decide to build on this piece of property,
Very good possibility. Or the other way around.
or the other way around.
Gives the big house to the kids. and
So does he have to
downside.
keep performing activities?
we just gotta come in for the extension. That's it.
But like you said, the rules will keep changing.
Or as long as he keeps it, as long as the commission keeps approving the extension.
Leslie, have statute back,
Oh,
please. There's another section, I still want to look over there.
what, I think, I agree with you, we should leave it the way it is, as they come in, which is not often.
Yeah.
We'll see how it is.
Do you want to make it regulated activity?
Yeah, I
though?
think we should add the word regulated.
Regulated.
That way we'll cover the referrals also.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of more in favor of the regulated.
Well, I think that's what it really was intended to be. It just forgot to put that word in.
We had this, in our regulations in Branford, and I think it was in the model regs like that. I think that's where it came from back in the 80s or whenever they were, 90s or whenever they were written.
74. Actually. All right, so we're going to change that to regulated activity?
Yeah.
How about regulated activity under this permit?
That's what it is. It's under this permit anyways.
Well, I mean, I think at that point, it clearly defines who, what, where, when, why, and how.
Right.
Sort of.
Yeah.
That way, if they conduct regulated activity that was not conducted under this permit, and in the way it was supposed to be conducted under this permit, then
I think we have a little bit
it
more
doesn't
teeth.
count.
Right.
Right. I think that's good.
Did you get that? Regulated activity under. Okay.
I think, though, we can still continue to think about this, because what I just realized is that we're kind of picking through the regulations and the statutes and trying to understand it, but I don't know that we established an objective of what we are trying to avoid.
Agreed.
And I think, just over the course of time, if we think about that, then maybe it'll help solidify the phrasing.
It smells funky.
No, smell like that. Okay. What do you think? All set with old business?
I have one other. Diana, you brought up a point, I think, that's what I was just trying to look for. At the last meeting, we talked about I think it was 65 days prior to a permit expiring.
Yeah, there's a section that tells about extensions of permits. I just actually,
And I want to
Had
get
it
that
in here.
cleared up while we're at it.
That's supposed to be in writing?
Yeah, we do have a section on extending a permit.
I think 38129.
Which does not establish a time period.
Right, and and that's what I'm concerned about, the 65 days, because it says, any application to renew a permit shall be granted upon request of the permit holder, unless the commission finds that there's been a substantial change in circumstances which requires a new permit application or an enforcement action has been undertaken with regard to the regulated activity for which the permit was issued, provided no permit may be valid for more than 10 years. The upon request to me means at any time, not, if we say 65 days before, what if they come in at 60 days? Are we going to not do it? This is almost saying you have to do it unless we have these other circumstances.
You're absolutely correct, and I think I know where the 65 days comes from. And I believe the 65 days comes from in the building department, before they get their CO, they have to notify the building official 65 days prior to their opening date, so that everything can be in place. In other words, they have 65 days from saying, okay, we're going to open up on September 1st, and it's now back in July sometime, to get everything done and finished, so that everybody, including
Sign off.
the sign-off people, which I'm included on an awful lot of the COs, has a chance to do all the final inspections. If there's anything wrong, make the corrections to it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's probably where that 65 days came from. So time frame is,
Well,
it's
that
gotta be
does-
just before the
5
meeting
years.
before the thing is going to expire, is really all we need.
Which
what
is
you're
5
saying.
years.
No, No, like, they just need to do it before it expires.
Right.
Once it expires, they can't come in and have
But it
it
expires in
renewed.
5 years. It would be these are 5-year permits.
Right, so they've got their date right here.
Right.
No,
So they
we
can-
can renew it for 1 year each time.
Oh, I know, but they have to tell us before,
It could expire in 2 years if they haven't begun, or 3 years if they haven't begun the regulated activity, and then they'll need to request an
Right.
extension.
I don't think so.
That part, I'm still worried, you said that again, and I don't believe that's true.
Right, because you're saying if he didn't cut a tree or anything after 3.5 years, it's expired?
What if they come in before 3 years, say, I'm not ready to start yet, I haven't done anything yet, I'd like to request another year in order to initiate the regulated activity?
That's different.
That's different.
That's entirely different.
If they
That's
come in,
something we have to work on.
if they come in here 4 years later, and they didn't do one thing yet, looking at this, I mean, I know he didn't start, but his permit really didn't expire until 5 years.
Well, see, that's because this is ambiguous.
Well, that's why we're having this discussion.
So you're saying within 3 years, they have to extend it because they didn't start the regulated activity?
Right.
All
Okay.
right, and then we need to change
So
our
you gotta
regs to
change,
reflect
gotta
that.
change that.
We can't change, I don't believe that we could actually change that in the permits.
No,
because
no,
there's
not
no
here.
proviso
You gotta
for
change
that.
it in here.
Yeah.
The regulated activity has to be done within the 3 years.
There's a reference in the statutes, if you look in that history section, the little print,
Yeah, I saw that.
that may help to explain, because it gives a little bit of background.
Yeah, about the require zoning compliance before regular activity is conducted. Requires that company to find reason. Add provisions authorizing the applicant to accept one or more extensions. That's, a lot of this is going for public hearings. So I think you put the little pencil mark over there. That's for public hearings.
Maybe we have to restate this, something like the permit will expire within that, or at 3 years if regulated activity has not been initiated. And the
But-
permit will not be valid for any longer than 5 years, or something like that.
Well, I mean, it says once the permit has been issued, it will be valid for 5 years, even though the first part of it says you have to start within 3.
Yeah, but you know what? The first thing doesn't say that the permit will expire if it hasn't been started in 3 years.
Okay. So you would have to put regulated activity must be initiated within 3 years,
Or
or,
you can't, because statute doesn't allow you to stop that.
right.
No less than 2, no greater than 5. I think we need to be,
I would just let it stay the way it is, and if somebody comes in, if the 4th year and asks to have it another year, that's when we would say, listen, you have a year, but you have to start the regulated activities.
Well, see, I think if you're putting a condition of approval that the regulated activity has to begin within 3 years and they don't comply with that, then their permit isn't valid.
but it's not really a condition of approval. It's just, again, that's just something that's on the permit as a timeline here, and I'm just above where you were, Leslie, here. It says if a municipal inland wetlands agency regulates activity within areas around wetlands or watercourses, such regulation shall, number 1, be in accordance with the provisions of the inland wetlands regulations adopted by such agency related to application for and approval of activities to be conducted in wetlands and/or watercourses, and apply only to those activities which are likely to impact or affect wetlands and watercourses. There's still a regulated activity, but is there going to be an impact or effect on the wetland or watercourse under that 3-year initiation? Should it only be activities that are actually going to have a direct impact?
I don't know, I think we've got to go really by the text, which is regulated activity, if we consider it a regulated activity. Which are those which will likely impact?
What's the definition of a regulated activity?
Well, that's big.
Yeah, without going through, just first sentence.
Any operation or use of a wetland or watercourse involving removal or deposition of material, any obstruction, construction, alteration, or pollution of such wetlands or watercourses, in any construction of a residential building, residential institution, site establishment of a new lawn, I'm still on the first sentence, non-residential building, commercial or industrial building, decks, pools, parking areas, or subsurface sewage disposal system within 40 feet of wetlands or watercourses as set forth in 22A-42A of the general statutes as amended, and...
Okay, you can stop.
Keeps on going for quite a ways before...
Read the
we go
last
to the period.
sentence, read the last sentence.
The commission may rule that any other activity located within such upland review area or any other non-wetland or non-watercourse area is likely to impact or affect wetlands or watercourses and is a regulated activity. And that was amended on 9/23/03.
Yeah, key word there is may. So going back,
Or
To-
likely.
Likely not many.
The commission may rule that the area is likely to impact or affect a wetland, the activity.
right, still, but it's up to the commission to decide what likely means. So now going back to the statutes, that history note, I don't see any conflict.
Oh, can we just remove, once a permit has been issued, it will be valid for 5 years?
No, I guess what I was saying is that I don't see any conflict in saying that the permit will expire after 3 years if no activity, no regulated activity has been initiated.
Well, in the history section, under Public Act 92-148, as amended, subsection D, to modify the authority of wetlands agencies, RE expiration dates of permits and time required for completion of regulated activities. So, apparently, oops, I'm sorry, that's Public Act 93-305, subsection D. So you do have the authority to modify expiration dates of permits and time required for completion of regulated activities. So we're back to, let's do regulated activities under this permit for the 3 years, otherwise this permit is void. I don't believe we can say that.
Yeah, but you could just get rid of the second part of it, right? Once the permit has been issued, it'll be valid for 5 years. Why do you need that?
Or you can say for no more than 5 years. Because you want to state in there that it's not valid for 10 years, it's
Right.
not valid for 6 years, it's no more than 5 years. But I think that we have to have a consequence of the regulated activity not being initiated within 3 years. It doesn't say what happens.
And if nothing is done, again, let's say it is a vacant piece of land, if nothing is done, why should the applicant be penalized? Why should they lose their permit? If nothing is done.
Because they're holding on, they're trying to hold on to old regulations.
But if they didn't do anything, so what? We'll get them in 2 years, or not.
And they can apply for an extension at 4.5.
They could.
They could. So again, we're still back to this.
Well, I mean, there's really not a high demand of this coming in, this situation.
Well, it happened with Night Meadows recently. We just approved 411 and 407 Old Tavern Road. They did come in for extensions and got up to their 10 years and still didn't build. And they're now finally building, you know, after 22 years, for crying out loud, from the time that the land was given to the heirs by the rest of the families. But they didn't do anything. They didn't create any regulated activities, disturbances,
But I thought
pollute,
that-
anything. So again, why should they be penalized for hanging on to old
I
regulations?
thought it was the most, could be extended, be 10 years total, right?
10 years old, so that's why they had to come in and start all over again, and we
Right.
looked at it as a new application. But
Right.
there was no harm, no foul, because nothing was initiated within the 3 years, and quite frankly, I didn't go back and look to see if the old permits actually had that on there. Because the old permits were a little yellow piece of paper that had like 5 different things: a plenary ruling, don't worry, I'm head just now. Declaratory ruling, a summary ruling, there was like 4 or 5 parliamentary type rulings. That was the way it was set. That was back in your day as secretary, as a matter of fact, of this commission, as recorder, or executive secretary. It used to be that little piece of paper, all those little boxes on it. And that's long gone by the wayside, but I don't recall whether that was actually on there. I forgot to look. I have one for myself from years ago. I didn't even look at it. So, again, you know, yeah, they want to hang on to the old regs to some degree, but if nothing was done,
You're gonna lose it anyways, eventually.
they may or they may not. If they go,
Depends how long they go.
depends on how long they go. The permit is still valid for 5 years, no matter what.
Unless we state that if they don't conduct the regulated activity within 3 years, it expires.
I don't see we can.
We can, because it says that we can't, any permit issued under this article for any other activity shall be valid for not less than 2 years. That means we can say it's only valid for 2 years. I don't,
Yeah, or no more than 5.
No more than 5.
But statute, again, back to that,
And you just read in the statutes that expiration dates can be amended.
under history.
Well, that's really the important part of the regulations, because it gives you the reason.
It was 93, oh, fire is.
however, it does say any permit issued under this article for any, other activity shall be valid for not less than 2 years. So maybe that doesn't apply to 8.3, 8.25, and 8.26 applications.
Which is what we were talking about earlier. It's only those that go to that zoning that we have to go from the 2 to the 5, correct? Are we in agreement with that?
Right.
I guess the question is, if they don't do the regulated activity within the 3 years, then
What?
there has to be a consequence, otherwise,
Oh, if you change.
why
the
to put it
three-
on there?
Change the 3 years to 5 years.
We don't have to have it at all, we just say it's...
No, I know, but if you put 5 years, that expires the same time.
Yeah,
This actually,
What?
this probably actually muddies the water by having this 3-year.
Right, if you do 5, if you're not done, it's done. If you don't come in for extension, it's all over.
I guess the question is, do we want to limit it to 3 years, or do we want to just go with a 5-year permit?
Right, it's 5 years already anyways. So take the 3 out, put it at 5, do regulated activity instead of activity,
Or just strike it.
or just, right, or just,
valid for 5 years.
right.
Which
Why
is-
did we want to do 5?
Because that's,
three.
in reality,
Three.
that's what it is. Because if somebody comes in at any time, they can ask for the extension.
Right, but why did we want to do 3 years? Somebody refresh me.
Well, 3 years is just to get the guy to start doing something, at least to work. That's my opinion, just to get the job.
Okay, so it was
Started.
no more than a nudge to make sure the project goes on schedule.
These things would only really happen to family-owned land. If, like you said, no one's gonna spend that kind of money and not start a job.
And there's situations where you could have inheritance tax problems where the the land eventually will maybe come to the heirs, but they have to get those resolved. And to be quite frank, they're probably applying for a permit in 1995 because they know the Wetlands are going to change. I mean, that's only common sense. You can't fault people for doing that.
Well, yeah, again, I agree with that. I don't think somebody should be penalized for doing nothing.
Right.
I mean, there's, again, no harm, no foul, so, and then we have situations where we have two major projects here in town, both of them went to court. Are their permits no longer valid? It turns out that their timeline gets told while it's in court, so that was another thing that had to come out of this three-year question that came about, and it was ruled by the courts that the permit gets told while the court is in session.
Right.
So we have one project here in town up on the hill that's, you know, their regulated activities were de minimis in that regard, but it's already been, you know, well over 3 years. So when does it pick back up again? When the court said, okay, you won or lost? If they won, they can pick back up again. If they lost, obviously, you know, it's back to the drawing board. So you have to, that's just another piece there that has to be played with, that we're kept track of. But Jay, I think you make a good point also, that Rick, that how often does this happen? And I think this probably was put in because, as Walter mentioned earlier, that there were so many changes in the beginning and so many things that were occurring, and we never had a full-time enforcement officer either. So a lot of stuff would go on 3 years after or 2 years after a permit was issued, and everybody gets up in arms and they start screaming and hollering what's going on over here, and then you dig back through and they find out, well, you know, they were given a permit X amount of years ago. The permit was good for 5 years and they're starting it 4 years later, so I'm beginning to think that maybe that was what precipitated or was the genesis for that
To start the
activity
job.
must be initiated.
Right.
Because there were so many different things going on back then, and again, we didn't have the enforcement action that we do today, so maybe it just needs to be stricken.
So what are we gonna leave this at? Gonna put 5 years or 5 and 5? It's almost the same.
5 years, same thing.
The same thing.
Strike it.
Right, just strike it.
We'll strike it. And that's not a regulation change.
No.
So we don't have to do a public hearing or any of that happy nonsense. And like I said, the same, you know, the 411 and 407 Old Town Road just now went through the same thing, and they had to start from scratch with new regs.
Okay, that was easy.
Right, so I mean, we'll stay with the, whenever somebody wants that 5 years, they just gotta do it prior to that meeting.
Right.
Or-
They still gotta come in to ask for the extension.
Right,
Right, that doesn't change.
but it doesn't have to be 65 days before.
No.
Okay. I just wanna make sure we were clear on that.
Since
Is
you're
that stated somewhere else in the regulations, though? The 65 days, like under something about submission of applications or something, time frame?
No, actually, there was a change to that in statute, as you know, that it has to be 24 hours from receipt for an application, but there's nothing on renewals. That was just something I think I said, I think I know where that came from. It was all those, out of the building department.
So since you're doing a good job, let's go to the enforcement officer's report.
Oh, 200 Indian River Road.
Yeah.
That's the Christmas Tree Shop Plaza. The, behind the AC Moore building, if some of you will remember, probably you,
Thanks.
the only one. There's a private pump station for that
Right.
plaza. It overflowed again. Fortunately, there's a rather large biofilter over there, and most of the effluent that came up through a manhole in the parking lot did end up in that biofilter, and I couldn't see. It was pretty dark, but I didn't see much that actually made it to the watercourse back there. After more than an hour of not getting a response out of the company, the leasing company to send their on-call person down to fix the pump. I just called DEP and let them deal with it, and they had that thing sucked out, backed out, cleaned up, and straightened out in a couple of hours, and somebody got a big fat bill for double time on a Sunday night. But I am sending them a letter that they have to do something about their pump station and its issues. But that's it for me.
That's it.
Scott, was that from the parking lot?
The backup occurred behind the parking lot, behind the building in a, like, truck dock loading area. Well, it's a low point in the gravity line going into the pump station. And when the pumps failed, after time, it just started to come out of the parking lot and leak slowly right in towards the large biofilter that's back there. And unfortunately, On the Border Restaurant is the one that took the brunt of DEP's action because they were the only ones that were still open at the time, and they're probably the greatest wastewater users.
Right.
But, like I said, I went back down there the next morning, and I didn't really, couldn't find any evidence of any major calamities to the watercourse. I just wanted to apprise you of it, that's all.
Okay, our next meeting is April 22nd. See everybody then. Good night.